My name is Haitham Khraishi, and this is my story. On the Mindset Mastery Moments podcast, we are calling Chatting with Slava the Jordanian. Hello and welcome back to another episode of our space here. I'm your host, STJ, as many of you know me on Instagram. I'm very, very excited to have this young man on our podcast today as our guest. Let me give you a little bit of background of who's Haitham. He's a Palestinian-American born in the Washington, D.C. area, but grew up in both Maryland and Palestine. His family is originally from Tulkarm, Palestine. He is a mechanical engineer by education, but in his free time, he creates history, geography content about flags of the world on TikTok, and he's also a tour guide at the Museum of Palestinian People in DC since 2020. His content focused on Palestinian history videos exploring sites, cultures, and figures from the ancient, medieval, and modern area of Palestine and the greater region of what we call Bilad al-Sham, as you guys know it, the Levantine region. Thank you, Haitham, for coming on. We're very, very excited, and I can't wait to hear your stories.
Thank you, Dr. Slava, for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I am so excited. I've been thinking about this for a while since JD Youssef, who's my co-host, mentioned you, and he connected us. And I'm glad that you had the interest to come on. So, as you know, our platform, this space is all about storytelling. So let's start with walking down memory lane. And tell us about how did you end up here in the United States?
Yeah, so what's interesting with my story is I was born in the state of Maryland. I am the youngest of 3 children to Palestinian immigrants. And what was really interesting growing up is before I moved to Palestine in my elementary school days, I basically lived in an America that was pre 9/11. And by the time I moved to Palestine and during the second Intifada and then came back to the U.S., I returned to a U.S. that was post 9/11. And it was just interesting being in Palestine during the second Intifada, but also during the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003. So it was a very odd feeling being both Palestinian in America and then also an American in Palestine, but also having the Palestinian experience in the Second Intifada, living under Israeli military occupation and not having a sort of understanding or total control of the life I had as a kid. And so by the time I came back to the U.S., I already felt somewhat foreign, even though, yes, I still spoke English. I still felt like I didn't understand the slang or what was popular with kids that day. But my experiences, I had a Palestinian childhood as well. So experiences of seeing violence or destruction or understanding of geopolitics that maybe someone else who was in 6th grade, age 11 or 12 in the US would not have understood. So it was kind of a combination of the Palestinian childhood, but now sort of the Arab or Muslim experience of post 9/11 America. So that's kind of the beginnings or the formative years of my childhood before becoming a teenager.
Okay, time out. Let's back up a little bit. So, first of all, so you were born in DC and you ended up back in Tulkarm, Palestine at that time?
Yeah, so now both of my parents are from Tulkarm, but I personally lived in El Bire and Ramallah areas because they had better school systems. But every weekend we would travel to Tulkarm, going through a bunch of different checkpoints at the time and living in a time where the checkpoints were being added as we go. And then the separation wall was very, very new. Like it was just being added at the time in 2002.
So what prompt you to go back to, how old were you when you went back to Palestine?
When I went back to Palestine, I was 6 years old, and my mother wanted my sister and I to be closer to our culture, the faith, being Muslim, and I think she wanted us to have the experience of being Palestinian, to be more connected to our family and roots over there. And what a experience! If any time to connect to your roots, then the second Intifada.
I know, right? Timing is everything. So, and how many years did you finish high school over there?
So it was my elementary school. So much of my childhood was spent there. I started in grade 2 and then finished grade 5 there. So I spent about 4 years. And I used to visit before. I used to visit in summers before I lived there, and then I would visit in summers after. So I remember the feeling of, now, Tulkarem and Ramallah are in the West Bank, but Tulkarem, what some people don't know is it was a coastal city closer to the Mediterranean, but because of the Israeli occupation and now after the Second Intifada, Palestinian ID holders could no longer go to these cities that were occupied by Israel in 1948, like Yafa or Haifa or Akka. So we, as a people who were technically a coastal people, were disconnected from the sea. But before that, I have memories of going to the beach. It's a area that was once known as Khalid, but the Israelis call it Netanya today. I used to be able to go to the Mediterranean Sea there, but then by the time I lived in Palestine, I could no longer visit the beach. So in Tulkarem, if you stand on the rooftop of any slightly high point, you can see the Mediterranean, but you can't go. So I just remember the shift in the dynamic of once going to that beach in 1999, 2000, until now you're 2002 and you can no longer access the beach.
No, that's so sad. That's so sad. So let's just dive a little bit deeper into, as a child, what did you take away from that experience? And how did you feel when you came back to the States? Did you feel that, that yearning feeling that I don't belong here? Because one of the things that we discuss on this series is basically the identity crisis that we go through as, a multinationals. You're born here, but your parents are from, Palestine. I have like a triple crisis because my mom's Jordanian, my dad is Palestinian, min Nablus, and I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia, and now I'm an American, so it's very complicated. But I was an adult when I embarked on that journey, in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia was, our home. We visited Jordan I was as a guest, honestly. I did not connect with Jordan that much. I connected to the United States and Saudi Arabia more. I connected with Jordan. But that also, as an immigrant, first generation American, or even, first generation American immigrant, you get to a point in your life that you go through that identity reassessing, like, who am I? Do I belong here? I follow this Instagrammer. She's Syrian, and she's from Arizona, and she was a broadcaster on the local channel in Tucson, Arizona. And she decided to pack it all up and go live in Cairo. She's living in Cairo right now, which area outside of the city of Cairo, it's called Rehab. Majority of that new Cairo is all Syrian, not refugees, but Syrian businessmen and entrepreneurs that actually fled Syria, took their money, and they settled in Egypt. And she talks about how she woke up one day and she asked herself, who am I? where do I belong? And she just felt like, of course, she can't go back to Syria. So she decided to go to Egypt, and she said it on her Instagram post that I don't think I'll ever gonna leave, because she has that feeling of belonging. And that's one of the most challenging emotions people like us go through, because as your parents taught you, is you need to stay connected to your background, to your heritage. We are so proud of who we are. I mention it all the time. My dad used to tell me, it doesn't matter how rich you are, how educated you are, how big you become, don't ever forget where you came from. And that just get instilled in us when we are so young as children, and we grow with that. We grow with that belief system that, I am who I am, regardless of how I look, how I speak, what kind of education I have, or what kind of job that I have. So I guess, like I said, going back to my question, when you came back here in the United States, what are the things that stayed with you and became as an adult, your own belief system as your identity of who you are?
Yeah, I think, from the time of living in Palestine, and especially, peak Second Intifada, a lot of the frustration, the feeling of being really tired. I think, well, in Arabic, we use the term qahir. So I don't know how to describe the concept of qahir in English. But it's like you feel this weight, and it's like I felt I saw the worst aspects of being Palestinian, but maybe I didn't fully embrace the nice things about being Palestinian or being from Bilad al-Sham, the Levant, because I felt like I didn't get to see the joy aspect of it. I mainly felt the pain of it, and the pain it inflicted upon my family or family friends, and other sets of society, whether we liked them or not. I think, being back, I was thinking like, I don't want to deal with checkpoints anymore. I don't want to see drones flying over me. I don't want to be yelled at by a guy with a M16. I don't want to show a bunch of documents. I just want to be able to go from Maryland to Virginia, without any blockade or any obstacle. So I think that took a long time to get used to. Is I would think, somebody's going to stop me, or, maybe I have to hide somewhere. But I think, part of me, I felt like I wanted to be done with that. Now, I will always be Palestinian, and this is me when I was 11 years old thinking this. I'm always Palestinian, but I think I wanted to just be an American kid. And when I say that, I mean I just wanted to watch my cartoons. I just wanted to make friends. I wanted to play with toys. But it was difficult making friends, and I remember any time that somebody would ask me where I was from, because I didn't go to the same schools as some of these other kids, I would say, I was coming from Palestine. But a lot of these kids never heard of Palestine. I mean, they're all 11 years old. I don't think I would expect them to either. But having to explain it and not being able to point to Palestine on the map, that's when I thought, this is different. I can't seem to explain. And I remember one big moment that stuck out was, we had social studies class, and we finished a quiz. And when you finish the quiz, you flip the quiz over when you're done. And then the teacher collects the papers after. And so I flipped my paper over because I finished my quiz. And then I started to draw on the back of the paper. Then I started, but what I was drawing was a tank, like Israeli tanks and kids with like the Palestinian flag and all of that. And the thing is, drawing soldiers and drawing tanks and flags and all of that, that was normal in Palestine. It wasn't really normal in the US. And then my teacher looked at my drawing and she said, "What is that?" I said, "Oh, it's just Palestinians fighting against an Israeli tank." And she was like, "Oh, interesting." She just took my paper. That's it. So it was just really, it was weird. And I think I remember in arts class, I tended to use the colors black, red, white, and green, which you can find on a lot of Arab countries' flags. So it was just, those were colors I liked. So I tended to use those a little bit more. So then I realized, even though I was frustrated or maybe I left with a sad or angry experience, I naturally couldn't stop thinking about it, or I couldn't get the colors out of my mind or the images out of my mind.
That's really deep. It's funny you said that one of your most concerns as a child, you just wanted somewhere that it's borderless. You know, there's no borders, there's no checkpoints. I'm not sure if you listened to the first episode we taped with Dr. Meher Massis on this special edition, which is Discovering Palestinian Intellect. He described how he came to the United States. He grew up in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, and Dhahran did not have a good a high school for boys. So his dad sent him here to the United States where his brother was. So I'm not sure what state he was in, but he was boarding a plane to go see his brother in another state. And one of the things that he was struck by the fact that, you know, he was getting his passport ready and his ID ready as if there's a checkpoint. But the guy's like, "What are you doing?" You know, when he was checking his bags, he's like, "You know, I'm boarding a plane." He goes, "You don't need your passport." And that was in the 80s though. So he was fascinated how United States, as a big country with all these states, has no borders. You can travel all over, you know, without checkpoints, basically, because all he heard from his dad is, you know, the life in Palestine, how strict it is, you know, that your movement is strict and movement is watched, and like you said, it's checkpoints everywhere. That's fascinating. That's one of the things that you brought back with you and stuck with you as a child. Now, as you got older, did you ever did these memories just kind of got eroded, and did you replace them with different memories as you went through high school here in the United States, or did you always found yourself that piece of Palestine is still in you, and do you see it manifesting itself on and off as an adult?
Yeah, so I don't think I ever truly lost those memories. I think as I got older and maybe more into history, that, you know, I'm an adult now. It's strange as an adult when you read about the times that you lived in, and then you think, "Oh, I remember hearing about this," or "Oh, I remember people on the street yelling about this." That's what that was, or oh, maybe I understood it, or I know what was happening, but maybe I didn't understand the deeper why that happened or how it happened. And I think, you know, as I was going into high school, this time I would visit Palestine in the summers. So I was still, in a sense, growing up with my cousins, because I would spend 3 months of my year back in Palestine again. We still had our apartment, so we had a place that we would visit. That I think as I would visit, there were times where I didn't want to just sit around with my uncles and aunts. I wanted to actually explore a little bit. And yeah, travel is very restricted, especially if you have a Hawiyya, a Palestinian ID, where you're strictly only able to travel around the West Bank and not even all of the West Bank. But during the times I would visit in high school, we would go to Bethlehem, where you have the Church of the Nativity, where it's believed that Christ was born, or Hebron, Al-Khalil, where it's believed that Abraham, Prophet Ibrahim, and his sons and wives are buried, according to religious scripture. So I think that made me finally, I think slowly, I would see the beauty of being Palestinian or being connected to these sites and these cities, because even especially during the Intifada, you didn't have as much access to it, and I felt like I wasn't seeing many of the beautiful or nice things about being from our homeland. And that's the reality of living under a system of oppression, is things that are so close seem so far or seem foreign to you. For example, not being able to visit Jerusalem, I hated to feel like Jerusalem was a foreign city to me, which is really, really sad. But and then the times where I was able to get a permit to visit Jerusalem, which the last time I was able to do that was 2018, and the time before that was 2005. It was a strange, very surreal feeling, very bittersweet, where I feel like I have to be very careful with what I say, how I move, where I go. But there's so much, but you don't know what you want to ask. You don't know what you want to see. You just want to just exist there. So I think with time, my connection to Palestine improved more as I got more interested in the history, especially of places that I could not go, or places that maybe I could go, but I didn't know they existed, or maybe even my cousins, as we say, Ulad al-Balad, the sons of our land, maybe they haven't seen it, or maybe they haven't heard of it. So I wanted to be able to connect to these sites, the sounds, and whenever I would visit again, hopefully bring my cousins to see more of their homeland.
I can't imagine. It must have been really hard. And I pray every day that, God promised me to pray in Al-Aqsa, if that's the last thing that I would do. Because I grew up in Saudi Arabia. I've been to Medina, been to Mecca. I did so many Umrahs. I've never been to Hajj yet. But it is really something, regardless how, I call it the low, medium, high level of your commitment to Islam. It's still Al-Aqsa for us. It is the awal al-Qibla. So that's the first, direction and attachment to God that the Prophet Muhammad actually gave us. So before they built even Makkah and Medina. So that is sad. And I agree with you, Al-Qahar, the frustration, the emotional frustration that is tied up with, I bet you and your cousin, I can't imagine thinking that I can't go there, but there are international tourists that they are there enjoying those sites, and I can't be there. And I am the indigenous, people, indigenous blood of that land. So I can't even imagine the impact on mental health. I do have this initiative called What Cop, which is What About the Children in Palestine, that I post on Instagram on a Jordanian Women Entrepreneur account. And what I talk about is, my passion is, I believe in children. Children are our future. It might sound really a lame quote, but they are our future. And I think in order for us to raise a decent, healthy strong adults, it starts in the early developmental years. So my mom was a teacher, so she was in academia and she taught high school science and math in Saudi Arabia. But also she became a principal of a very, very award-winning, very famous kindergarten school in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And she taught me, she believed in children too. She goes, it all starts in the early years of nourishing and, and loving and caring about these children. So I talk about if the world, recognizes the impact on the children's mental health, especially in war zones, what about the children in Palestine? If we believe that, there are 140 million orphans in the world because of war zones, 140 million, orphans, and probably the numbers are going up as the terror of war over there continues. We are destroying the future, regardless where you come from, what's your background, what's your religion. We are destroying the future as these wars, all these systems, suppression and oppression, political systems are enforced on these children. So I cannot imagine the impact. At least you went and you visited and you got to have a break to come back to the United States. Like you said, I don't want to think about existing. I just want to live. Right? But you leave behind your family and your cousins that don't have that choice to jump on a plane and come back to the United States and turn all that off to recharge. You had the blessings of that opportunity to do so. I just want to talk about the impact on the well-being and the mental health. Did you compare how you see the world in comparison to how your cousins that's living through that day after day after day?
Yeah, it's, I try to tell people sometimes, especially as someone who loves to travel, one thing we can't control is where we're born. And, we need to understand, have the privilege, or even you could call it passport privilege, that shields you from a lot of realities that even on a small level of liking or loving to travel, you don't get that opportunity if you were born in X country versus if you were born in this other one. And you could say you feel guilty in a sense of, why me? Why did I get the break? Why didn't they? Don't they deserve it more? But it's, of course, like, it's not fully a factor within my control, but with the voice I have to, it's the bare minimum I can do is to speak for the people there. Because a lot of issues are not necessarily just the individual level, but it's a system level, that there's many powers that work not just against Palestinians, but against our whole region, that want to hold us back or want us to fight between each other, or communities within the same borders, fighting within each other, and playing us like we're chess pieces on a board. In a bigger game. It's hard to stay grounded, especially, but we have to, of course, show gratitude. But if we are able to raise our voice, we have to stay vocal about our people and what they're going through, especially if we live in countries that support or ignore the suffering that their support of our oppressors undergo. So
no, I mean, you're absolutely 100% right about that, and that's why we created the Discovering Palestinian Intellect, for us to just break out of this echo chamber of stereotype. We are more than that. And, when we came across the article that was published by Columbia Press blog that was issued in August 23rd, 2023, and it was the title was why Palestinians are the world's most educated refugees. And we dove into that a little bit, in deeper when I interviewed Dr. Mohammed Sis, and every Palestinian professional, whether engineers or doctors or dentists or PhDs, said exactly the same thing. The drive for education that our parents and our grandparents and our family put in us, it's really our, the ticket for freedom, in order for us to, to get heard or to be heard, and people to get to be interested in our opinion. What do we have to say? And that's the whole premises behind this special series, is to show the world that, their circumstances are sad. It's unfortunate. Yeah. Some of us were refugees. Some of us had to displace ourselves by default. We didn't want to leave, but we had to leave for a better life, or we are the children of the diaspora, but education was basically our lifeline, our bread and butter. And my dad used to say, I have two jobs in the world, is to give you education and put food on the table. Those are the two things, because your knowledge is the only thing nobody can take away from you. If you end up in a war zone, if you end up with a bad marriage, if you end up with, having kids, but they don't care about you, you have to start all over again. If you end up have to move and lost everything, through a natural disaster or what have you, your knowledge that I give you and degree I give you, that's the only tool that's going to help you recover any circumstances and any unfortunate events that happen in your life. That's going to push you to start all over again. So what do you think about that title? How do you feel when you hear that title of that article? And whether, how did your parents, I mean, you're a mechanical engineer now, how did your parents really push for education?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the title is pretty spot on. I mean, I'm sure there's I'm sure there's a lot of other like amazing people who have come out under other dire circumstances and suffering as well. But for sure, for Palestinians, for example, Naji Al-Ali, the artist of Hamdallah, his depiction of Hamdallah as a 10-year-old boy who doesn't age until he returns to his homeland is him. It's Naji Al-Ali, who was also displaced, made into a refugee into Lebanon from the area around Akka as a 10-year-old. So that spoke to many people, refugees or not, but the common man, those who, feeling with the poor, especially with all classes as well. And I think, knowledge, it is the core. It's something that I feel like you don't need school to continue the pursuit of learning. I always used to say, I wasn't the greatest at school. It's like, I don't like class, but I like to learn. I don't like class, but I like to learn. Because, sometimes, let's say, writing an essay, if you have class and you are assigned a research paper or an essay, it might be on a topic that you don't care about. But what if I tell you, write about a topic you do care about? You'll realize, like, wait, oh, I really like my voice, or I feel a little bit more confident. It's because you never got a chance to really show more of what you're able to do. And, education was, of course, very important within my family, especially being the youngest of three. My siblings, when they were college educated. My sister, for example, has done both a bachelor's and master's. Me, I wanted to. Now, my parents never told me to do engineering, which I'm sure maybe other parents wanted their kids to. I thought of it as a way that, so in 2007, well, 2008, there was a housing crisis, a recession, and I think I was pretty aware of that. And it's interesting. I used to watch the local news, the local Washington, D.C. news. And so I would see people in line at soup kitchens, and I remember even sometimes kids for Christmas, they sit on Santa's lap and what they ask Santa for. And I swear, this one little girl wrote a note to Santa, and she asked for to be able to keep their home or to keep their car. And I said, "Oh man, I feel like I need a job in the future, something that is a little more stable or secure." Because a lot of people, including members of my own family, lost a lot. So it was very scary. And so I think by the time I got to high school and was thinking about college in the future, I wanted to do something that you didn't need more, that could get me a job, but didn't need more schooling. So if you wanted to do medicine, you need more than just a bachelor's degree. You need a medical degree. Maybe before the medical degree, you did a master's, or for law, you need the same thing. But engineering, you really only needed your bachelor's. So I was just thinking to myself, what can I do to make sure myself and my family are in a good position without having to wait too long? And I did choose engineering. It wasn't necessarily because I liked it, but I thought, and nobody forced it on me, I thought it was necessary and that it could maybe break a cycle of struggle, especially, here in the US. Things are very expensive. Student loans are big. A lot of people, my generation, people in their 20s, their 30s, maybe even early 40s, they're not able to, they still have a lot of loans to pay off. Maybe they're not able to purchase a house, or, maybe they're scared of having kids because they can't really afford it. So I just wanted to eliminate some variables, and engineering was very difficult for me because math and science were those are my worst subjects, actually. I had good friends around me to help me out, and I worked really hard. It was very, very difficult. I didn't have the best grades, but I'm grateful, alhamdulillah, that we got through it and was able to get a job. And working is so much better than classes, because after I finish work, I go home. I don't have homework. I don't have quizzes. But if I want to give myself homework on something I like, I could. So I have the freedom of that now.
Now, did your parents, did they finish school in Tulkarm, or did they end up coming here for education? Did they not finish?
So my mother finished high school in Tulkarm, and she took care of the home. She also did a few jobs here and there, but then continued to take care of us at home afterwards. My dad, he finished his bachelor's degree in Alexandria, Egypt. Then he moved to Kuwait and was an accountant, and through Kuwait, he ended up working at the Kuwaiti embassy in Washington, D.C. Later, he would meet my mom in Tulkarm. They would get married, and then they would get married in the late 70s and move here. So, and they had my oldest brother in 81. So that's kind of how it started out in the U.S. My sister was born in the late 80s, and then myself in 95. But generally, with my dad, who does real estate, and later my siblings would as well, real estate, you just really needed a real estate license to get into the job. Real estate, it's based on commission and how good of a salesperson you are. And I couldn't do that. That wasn't really me. And especially, I think, with the memories from 2008 with the housing crisis, and seeing how much they struggled, it was a little scary I mean, of course, real estate would rebound later, but I was afraid of that, and I think my mom told me don't do that. So anything but real estate.
So did they put a lot of pressure on you to, you better get a degree because we did not just sacrifice everything for you not to get a degree?
So I think, of course, their expectation was the degree, but I feel that I put more pressure on myself because I had trouble a lot in school, like where I felt like I just didn't understand what was happening, where I feel like I would study or I would go meet with the teachers, but I wasn't grasping the concepts. So, if you're talking about mental health, a lot of feelings of inadequacy or not feeling good enough or not feeling smart enough, those were feelings that persisted for a long time, even into my career. Now, my perspective has changed a lot since, but, when you were younger and you feel like, oh, maybe my grades determine who I am, or it was always very difficult to have a bad grade, show that you're struggling, and then maybe your parents think you don't study. But in reality, I was studying a lot, but I was just having a really hard time. So that really affected me a lot personally. But it took a while to realize that, hey, you are not your scores, you are not your test scores. And that period is over. And you wouldn't get to this level if you were inadequate or not able to do it. So, that's my advice for a lot of young people who are just now attending college. It's just keep working hard, but please, understand you are not a piece of paper. You are not a number. Don't let that determine your life. You still have so much life. I'm in my 30s. I have so much life left. It's okay,
No, absolutely. Now, with that struggle, where did you draw comfort? Where did you draw resources in order to, feel that, I'm not inadequate? For example, everybody struggles in high school. High school is very awkward. But in high school in Saudi Arabia, that's when I realized I don't belong in Saudi, and I had to have a plan. I don't know where I'm going. I don't want to go back to Jordan. So I used to have those panic attacks with my mom. I was like, Mom, I'm very anxious. I can't take this exam. I can't go to school. Can I stay home? Can please stay home? My mom's like, no, go pray, or go have a snack, or go take a nap. Because mental health is not recognized in our traditional tribal.
It's just like, I'm doing all of it. Why? It's not working. It's not clicking.
Exactly. I need to see a therapist. I'm like, a therapist? What do you mean a therapist? We're not good enough, or God is not good enough? They used to get offended by that. So we didn't have an option except for keeping a stiff upper lip and move on, basically, get on with it kind of thing. And that leaves a residue, of self-value, self-awareness, social awareness. Especially in Saudi, we are, second-class citizens. We're not, so we didn't have the Saudi rights, like, for schools or jobs. I mean, luckily my dad was more like of an entrepreneur over there and he did really well, but still he kept his part of his money in Saudi and part of his money in Jordan. He just didn't trust it, because at any time, if they get upset at you, it's like, okay, you're out, kind of, your iqama is canceled. But I guess things have changed. But back in my day, it was hard. So when I used to hear some of the stories of our Egyptian friends or Syrian friends or Palestinian friends, they had to go back to Jordan, or they had only option either to go back to Egypt or to United States. And I felt like it was a pressure on me in high school. It's like, and I'm a girl too, boys had more opportunities than girls. And I had to have a plan, after high school, because again, I don't have rights in Saudi. I did not really relate to Jordan very much. I wanted to come to the United States, but it seemed so far away, to leave that, the nest of your parents. So it's funny, the traditional tribal connection in our culture really plays a huge role in how we draw our strength, how we draw our sanity, basically, our calmness, our serenity from that tribal connection. And you were born here. It's different than when your parents came here, when your dad came here. You literally ripping the roots out of where you are, because your dad went from Tulkarm, Palestine, to Kuwait, and Kuwait to United States. That's a lot of displacement. And regardless how strong you are, whether you have a good job or you're doing well with your life, at the end of the day, you're sitting with yourself and you say, who am I? You are very nostalgic about home, about the what if, what if I didn't leave Kuwait? What if I didn't leave Saudi? What would have happened? I always think of that. But it is incredible that you pulled through with all these challenges and you ended up getting your mechanical engineering degree. Now, I know your passion is with your TikTok content. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think you had a previous question where it was like, where did I find comfort, in a sense? And now, just for context, so where I went to university was Virginia Tech, which is in Blacksburg, Virginia. And for those that don't know, Blacksburg, Virginia is the farm. It's cows. And it's also not very diverse. So definitely the feelings of being lost, and I'm 5 hours away from home, in Maryland, it's very diverse. And so I just felt like there has to be something bigger in the world here. Like there has to be more than just this, pointing outside at the fields. And when I would come home from the engineering classes where I felt inadequate, I remember, I would watch a lot of history videos and little documentaries here and there. And I would think, oh, wow, there's so much of the world out there. Like, I never thought I would want to visit Kazakhstan, for example. Like, oh, Kazakhstan looks beautiful, or Uzbekistan looks beautiful. Oh man, Tunis, like, wow, Botswana, wow, look at all these countries. And so I just thought, like, when I get out of here, I want to travel, but I would love to talk about these places too. Fast forward, right after I graduated, I was able to travel a little bit until the pandemic in 2020. I no longer could. But I remember, the app TikTok was growing a lot in 2020. It came out before that, but it became especially popular during peak COVID time. And what was nice with TikTok is it allowed more people who maybe they never thought they had a creative side to them, or a voice. That it gave them a voice. It also gave them a chance to share their hobbies and share their interests and any knowledge that they have. And I remember I would just make random videos until I remembered when I was a child, I used to really like, one of my random interests was flags of the world. I used to really like flags of the world and their designs. I remembered I used to draw the flags of all the countries in the Arab League, and I would know their capitals. And then I once had an atlas, and I would try to memorize some capitals here and there. And so I said, what if I talked about flags, and I talked about what this design means, what are the colors and the symbolism of any of the world's flags mean. And the first flag I decided to do, I was going to do it in alphabetical order by countries in the United Nations. And so I started with Afghanistan. And I remember I talked about the flag of Afghanistan and the colors and the symbolism, and it got like over 100,000 views in 24, 48 hours. And I was like, oh, whoa, like people like this. What if I do another flag? And then I did Albania, and I was like, oh my gosh. And as I learned more about flags, you also learn what do these countries value, or you learn a little bit about their history or their culture. Maybe some symbolism represents different ethnic groups. Maybe it represents their land. Maybe it represents their independence struggle. There's so many things with that. And, with the flags, I later got into, geography. I can't travel, but I might as well talk about areas of the world. Why does South Africa have 3 capital cities? How did Vatican City become the smallest country in the world? And why is it surrounded by Rome? Why does this country have this weird shape? So I would make videos about that, and it brings you into history as well. So I got to learn so much about the world, and that made me want to travel more. And then, I'm very grateful I was able to start traveling more and making more videos. And that was the comfort, is that, while I felt maybe inadequate, or maybe that I didn't know much in terms of engineering or science, I felt really smart, or I felt like I knew what I was talking about when it came to the world, or even just having the curiosity. So it gave me some confidence back that, hey, now I feel like I know what I'm talking about. Or if I don't know, I can find the answer. It's fine. So it made me feel really good. And I feel like I've been able to connect with more people from around the world through that.
It is fascinating. I can't help but think maybe your experience in Palestine being so restricted to navigate through some of the holy places and go into that, adventure of discovering all these, what we call turath, which is the heritage and the culture and the history there. I wonder if subconsciously that made you think I want to explore, I want to know more. But here I am having all the resources under my, fingertips in order for me to almost, mentally, emotionally travel through the world. Because as you mentioned, when you came back, you were drawing the Palestinian flag. So your passion and your fascination around flags, I think it was since the beginning of time, and here you are doing what you are so passionate about, and that's what amazes me, that when we are children, going back to the point that I was making, anything that impacts you in the early developmental years will make us who we are as adults. And I wonder if you never ended up going back to Tulkarem, to Palestine, would you ever do what you're doing right now with like flags in different countries? I think your passion, curiosity came from breaking free from the restrictions that you experienced, as a child. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And, even when I've traveled in groups, let's say I've met friends from around the world I'm very blessed and lucky that, hey, now I can visit a friend in Mexico City, or I can visit a friend in Brazil or Germany or South Africa. And I remember I was telling one of these friends, you and I, we love to travel the world. That friend, for example, is in Bhutan, in Nepal. He's visiting the Himalayas. I told him, of course, I would love to visit so many countries, but I would rather, if I had the option of seeing all of historic Palestine versus seeing the rest of the world, I would choose historic Palestine, because I would love to see Akka. I would love to see the walls that fought against Napoleon's invasion in 1799. I would love to see that history of going back to the Canaanite and Phoenician era trade cities, and before borders, how, cities in southern Lebanon like Sur and Saida were so connected with Akka, and fishing for snails that created the purple dye, which became famous. Or visit Jaffa, where my grandfather, although he was from Tulkarem, he lived in Jaffa. He used to ship those oranges, the Jaffa oranges, to Cyprus and to Lebanon before the Nakba of 1948. I would love to see those places, and I don't know when I will, but I was able to visit Palestine in May of 2023, and I said, although I am restricted to the West Bank, I'm going to make the most of it this time. For the cities that I can visit, I'm going to see more of it than I ever have before. And I did just that with 2 big cities. So aside from my own Tulkarem, where I got to see, we have shrines around, not just Palestine, but you can find them in Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, or maqamat, that were built in the 1200s by the Mamluk dynasty. They would build different shrines of people that, while maybe it's not big in Islam necessarily, maybe some would say it's shirk, or, it's interesting because to villagers, to fallahin from our homelands, who maybe didn't have a mosque in their village, the idea of visiting a shrine or an area in your village goes back to your pagan era. So maybe during the Canaanite eras or later eras, you inherit this feeling of wanting to visit this particular spot for blessings. And, that's true with a lot of religious buildings around our region. Like, why would the Kanisat al-Mahd, the Church of the Nativity, why would it be in that exact spot in Bethlehem? Because maybe before it was a church, maybe it had a significance to it. And so the significance is carried forward into generations and later religions. But before, different gods would be worshipped. And this is the same in Damascus, in Gaza, in Jerusalem, all over. So I got to visit Ariha, Jericho, which has a history of 10,000 years. I got to visit a lot of the beautiful historic sites there. Hisham's palace, Qasr Hisham, which has the largest floor mosaic, Fusa in the Middle East. I got to see ancient Jericho, the old tells where human civilization started in that city. And then to the shrine of Nabi Musa, the Prophet Moses, where there used to be a festival, a cultural festival that only really happened in Palestine, where visitors, mainly of the Sufi tariqas, would visit from Bethlehem, from Al Khalil, and from Jerusalem, and visit the shrine of Moses, where people would collect barakah or blessings as they would take part in the mawsim or the festival. And so I learned that, wow, cultural festivals existed. And some of these cultural festivals in Palestine stopped after 1948. So it was the collective experience of Palestinians. You didn't just lose your homes, your villages, your towns. You lost senses of your identity. You lost cultural practices, sometimes your craft. And you have roots in Palestine from Nablus. Am I right? The soap factory, the soap making business, and to go from over 80 factories to now one operating factory, you're losing so much of what makes you a Nabulsi, someone from that city. And, everyone in Palestine is proud of a craft, even if it's mainly done in one city, but they're proud of it. And I got to visit Nablus in a more detailed way where I visited the refugee camps of Balata. I went to the old Canaanite mounds of Tel Balata, where humans first inhabited the area of Nablus. I got to see the Roman ruins at Sebastia, the Jacob's Well, where it's believed that a Samaritan woman offered Jesus a drink of water from the well. I got to see the old city of Nablus, I got to go on the mountain at Jabal Jarazim, Mount Jarazim, where the Samaritan sect, the Samaritan faith resides. So it was like, wow, all of this is in one city that was not very far from Tulkarem. I had access to this, but I never got to. And although I can't access other parts of Palestine, for the parts that I can access, I want to make the most of it.
This is like, you won't believe we have reached the end of our hour, but I cannot wait to bring you back just to dive even deeper into these journeys. I mean, this is fascinating. My dad's mom, Jidditi Azia Nablsi, her cousin Bint Khalidha, she lived in Nablus till she passed away. So she used to go back and forth from Jordan. Of course, she was born in Salt Bil-Urdun, my grandmother. Mm-hmm. She never stopped going there. She wanted that connection to Palestine. But this is fascinating, seriously. Yani Haitham, oh my God, I can talk to you all night long. Unfortunately, we have to end it, and I would love to have you over again. I hope you would agree to come back. So thank you everybody for listening and watching and hanging out with us for this episode. As a reminder, these episodes are uploaded every week on Wednesdays on the Spotify and the Apple podcast platform, and also you can watch these episodes on the Green Mode Dental Partners YouTube channel. I'm gonna put Haitham's TikTok account and Instagram if you guys are interested in watching all his adventures. And please, if you like this content, subscribe, hit the notification button, share, and like. That way it will help us continue making this amazing episodes with Discovering Palestinian Intellects. Thank you again so much for coming over, and I hope you come back, and I hope to see you guys next time.